Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Jim Turvey. He's at Turvey Bets, contributor for the Action Network. This is your Futures Friday episode. We're going to talk about some Western Conference. We're going to talk about the MVP race, which the odds have shifted. I have thoughts on that. We'll get into that and more. You can also find in the feed our Best Bets episode for Friday. Jim's going to help me out with that as well as he does every single week. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing well, just decompressing from a full day of college basketball, trying to get back in the NBA mode. Shouldn't be too hard. There's some good futures out there, but we were talking a little bit beforehand. Sounds like both of our brackets are pretty done. I'm a Virginia fan, so mine's definitely done.
Hey, mine's still alive somehow. MIZ. We'll see if they can get past those Princeton Tigers. Where there's a chat going on in our Slack for Action Network where our guy Nick is like, what's the worst NBA player you could put on a college team and have them win the title? And I'm like, any of them. Any of, like, Bones Highland would be scoring 40 in these games. The strength and conditioning gap is so wide. Like, it's not about how good they are. It's not about what they did in college. It's not about, like, it's just strength and conditioning. Like, I watch these little kids out there hoisting up little jumpers and clanking everything off. And I'm like, have you ever seen an NBA warm up? Have you ever seen like a guard go through like a full, like a seasoned NBA guard with at least a year under his belt go through a full NBA warm up pregame? Because like, if you do and you do it in person, you would be like, oh yeah, no, these kids there's nothing they could do. So
we really just need some rule changes to make it happen. Get
Jim thinks this is
J.R.
possible.
Smith on the golf team.
Jim's on the side of like, let's make it happen and see what would happen. And I'm like, I don't want these poor children to die because, like, I'm trying to think of like Monte Morris goes too hard and caves one's chest in. Like, this is not a conversation. But what is a conversation is the MVP. We'll start there tonight. Currently at FanDuel Sportsbook, Joel Embiid is the new leader in the clubhouse at plus 100. Nikola Jokic falls to plus 160. Giannis Antetokounmpo is back of the pack at plus 370. Jason Tatum all the way at plus 10,000. Remember when we told everybody week by week not to bet on him? There you go. Devin Booker's plus 50,000, Steph Curry plus 50,000, and so on and so forth. Steph Curry and Luka Doncic have the same odds of winning it. Once again, Luka Doncic enters the season as the preseason favorite to win MVP. This should have been his year, and it does not happen for a variety of reasons. But I will just say that, like, can't always just be the coach in the roster. But that's another story for another day. So Embiid is the new favorite, and Jim, is my opinion. I said that this was a two-man race. I said it was. I thought it was done. I thought this whole thing was done. I thought Jokic was going to win. I've said it. I was like, you should bet him. He's going to win. We were on that train for a while. What I didn't expect, there was a couple of things that happened simultaneously. The biggest is that the well got poisoned. Kendrick Perkins went on First Take, and we've talked about this on the show before. Perkins went on First Take and made some real incendiary comments about the voting block that ESPN later had to basically say, like, hey, we weren't really aware of like Kendrick didn't actually look at like the voter list to see like who was on it. He just kind of like talks. But even then, it is majority white vote. But that was enough to like really change the conversation. And you saw like this evolution of like, we should really re-examine Jokic. We can't have like we can't have the only three-time MVPs in the last 40 years be Larry Bird and Nikola Jokic, two white guys. That looks bad. And so like you started to see that like kind of percolate, and then there started to be like another movement of like, okay, but what about playoff success? And like there's just like all of these attacks. And at the same time, and like Jokic admitted that he kind of like listened to this, that it was bothering him the way it was talked about. And the Nuggets went in the tank. They beat the Memphis Grizzlies, which essentially locked up the 1 seed for them. Like they're not going to get caught. They won tonight versus the Pistons. They'll probably win enough games to get out with the 1 seed. It's just very going to be, even the Kings 4 games back, it's going to be real tough for them to catch. Since then, they lost 4 straight. They did beat the Pistons tonight. We're recording this on Thursday night, so they kind of stemmed the bleeding. They'll probably stabilize a little bit here before the end of the season and secure the 1 seed, but like definitely a slide. All of these clips are distributed to the defense. And the biggest thing here, Jim, is that if you ask me, like, who are like rank the deserving candidates for MVP based off of your analysis of this award and basketball in general and your experience, I would say that Giannis is number 1, that Jokic is number 2. There's a gap. And then there's Embiid. But the difference here really is vote, like people in general, and I don't know if this is going to be reflected in the voting, they want to give this to Embiid. There is like a, he's been passed over twice and like he wants it so much. And I'm kind of like, I don't know that you want to be giving guys pity MVPs. I'm not sure that's what Joel wants. I'm pretty sure he just wants to earn it. But he definitely wants to win it. That's pretty clear. I took a weird swipe at Giannis about being a running back. That was a weird answer. The odds now have shifted, and Joel Embiid's plus 100. Do you want to buy Joel Embiid right now?
Well, I don't. It would feel, to be honest, I've been missing on this MVP race all season. When I should have been in on Jokic, I missed on Jokic. And then when a little bit of this chatter started to begin, which I haven't hated as much as everyone else. I think Perk, he was firing from the hip, and he did disservice by not, fully fact checking some of this stuff. I think most people agree that, what he's saying, it starts an interesting conversation at least. And if, he maybe had a little more nuance with it, a little bit of backing with it, it's a conversation to be had.
So I totally agree that there's important things to be talked about. And like, we're not going to debate it here on the show. It's a gambling show. The issue that he's trying to bring up are we're talking about, Jim. Is that why he's brought him up, or did he bring him up in order to make sure that people couldn't vote for Nikola Jokic? Because that's what he did, is he poisoned the well effectively. Like, you want to have a conversation. If Kendrick Perkins had come out and said, like, look, I think Nikola Jokic is the MVP, but systemic racism finds its way into every single thing in our lives, right? We could have an entire conversation about that I think is worth having. That's not what he did, though, Jim. That's not what he did.
No,
what he did was poison the well. So now you have a voter base that's like, I don't want to look like that. That's not what I want to look like. And the question is whether or not like that was like an appropriate and right thing to do. Regardless of whether it's appropriate or not, I think it was effective. I do think that it poisoned the well. And I think that the Nuggets play afterwards cemented that movement to the point where I think right now, if you're betting MVP, you should only be betting on Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Well, yeah, and he even had an on-ramp with, Jalen Rose a couple of years ago brought up, a similar point talking about like advanced metrics and if we should be thinking about, who's creating these and who they favor. And again, he could have done this in a way that could have started a good conversation if he'd said something like, by these metrics, Jokic is very deserving. Let's talk about the metrics themselves. But he didn't do that. And you're right. It does seem like the well's been poisoned. And, that being said, I don't see a whole lot of value on Giannis because I can't remember if it was you or Brandon or someone else who was on the podcast last week saying, I don't think the Jokic voters are going to flock to Giannis because Giannis's case this season isn't really an advanced metric case. His advanced numbers are down quite a bit. He isn't as efficient as in seasons past. And I think you're underselling a little bit of what Embiid has done. I think these voters that were on Jokic, well, I got to see what that reaction was. So you don't think you're underselling Embiid at all?
What is Embiid the best at?
I think he has a good argument as the best two-way player this season. I know you were lower on his defense.
Okay, so he doesn't create as much offense because Giannis's assist gap is pretty significant, correct?
Yeah, but I would say...
Who's the primary engine? Who brings the ball up for the Philadelphia 76ers? Is it Joel Embiid?
No, for sure. That's fair.
No, it's not.
No.
Giannis Antetokounmpo is an engine. Joel Embiid is the tip of the spear. And that's great. He's leading the league in scoring because he takes more free throws. That was an interesting one that I found was that they make the same number of field goal attempts per game this season. The gap for scoring is only by free throws, which I thought was funny. This is the problem is that Joel, if you're like, I don't know how you say that Joel's better than Giannis at defense. That's clearly not true. That's clearly like, there's a pretty massive gap there, Jim. Like Joel's like good. Giannis
ceiling
like,
wise, yes, but night to night, Giannis a lot more. Yeah.
Like Giannis is elite. Like he's like an elite defensive player. Has won a DPOY, for example, which Joel's not. He's been a more efficient scorer because he has a 3-point shot. They've got battled back and forth. Giannis had actually caught up to Embiid in efficiency. And then fell back like a little bit, but with the way Giannis is playing, he may wind up passing him once again in overall just general efficiency. like effective field goal percentage, just because based off of the number of ones that he takes. Like really what you're saying is, well, Joel's got a jumper. Like that's really, that's the only kind of argument here is like Joel's got a jumper. And so like, if that's true, then like anyone can, any jump shooter could be like, what about DeMar DeRozan? No,
well,
that's clearly ridiculous. So like best two-way player has got to be Giannis. Can we agree on that?
Well, I think Embiid affects like he warps a defense in a much different way than Giannis. It's a little bit tricky to compare, but I think because he has enveloped that jump shot into his defense, he is able to kind of move a defense and create shots for others.
Okay,
in ways.
How would we?
I'd love to see. I didn't look it up, but secondary assists, I'd love to see for this season.
How will we measure that? Like, we can't just like look at. We could do the eye test, right? And I'll tell you that on eye test, Giannis is going to win. But we could do the eye test. How will we measure that? Like, what would be like the? We live in a post-evidence society, which is why Joel Embiid's the new favorite. But like, if we were to do like a number on it, what would we look at?
Offensive, on, off, like the team with him on, team with him off.
Yeah, and so
offensive
like
rating.
And so like on the defensive side, the efficiency for for Giannis is much better. Like he is.
Yeah, no, night to night, Giannis is a much better defender. But we were talking offense.
Oh, okay. So on the offensive side, I think the question then is, and now this is like an interesting argument because the Sixers offense is good, and the Bucks offense has not been good this entire season, and that's like a compelling argument there. If we look at winning, this is the big thing though here, is if we look at winning, this is what I think is really fascinating, is like they're neck and neck in net rating on court, which again, like you could say that's an advanced metric. I think that's ridiculous. It's literally how much do you win by? Like past all this, if you believe that winning matters, net rating is the number that tells you, did you win when that guy was on the floor or not? But if you're a voter, don't you look at this and just go, but the Bucks have the best record and Mid was out for half the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Bucks are the better team though as well. I think the Bucks have a better coach as well. I mean, there's enough factors at play. I think that you are right in that Giannis is the better player this second, but I think that you can make the case that Embiid is having the better season.
You can, and that's why he's plus 100. I don't really know how. I'll just be honest with you. Like, I still don't know. Like, can you give me like what's the compelling? Like,
I think
I need something, whether it's like a number or a stat. Like, it can't just be like, I feel like he's. Well, that's where we are. Is like, I feel like he's great, but like, I don't know what actually is like a compelling argument for him.
To me, it comes down to the Bucks' offensive struggles with Giannis as the driver of that offense this season. As you said, he is the one bringing the ball off the court, and the offense has lackluster. So now I think that part of, we talked about not, bringing it nighttime on defense. Bucks, they're kind of in cruise control sometimes on offense on that side of things and save it for the other end.
I think that's probably fair. I think that's fair.
So to me, that's the one case.
So do you think that you should bet on Embiid now at plus 100 is the question?
The MVP race as a whole, I mean, we just, talked about it for a while, and I wouldn't trust anything right now. I even looked at some of these guys beyond the top three to see if somehow I could talk myself into that. That's not happening. No one other than those three is winning. I don't think there's a win-win out there for a better that I see, at least right now.
I think it's interesting. I think that Giannis is much more. I actually disagree with you on the central point. If we're going to get into like the betting side, I think I strongly disagree with you on the Jokic Giannis voter split. I don't think anyone is going to go from Jokic to Embiid. Not many anyway. And the reason is because like Giannis's advanced metrics are rough. He's lower in EPM and these kind of numbers. That's true. The Jokic voters aren't necessarily just voting off of him based on the advanced metrics. For me, it's more of like they understand like what has contributed most to winning, who's been most impactful for their team. And so this is where it's interesting, is because it's like from a metric standpoint, you can make an argument for Embiid. Like he actually has the advanced metrics in his favor. But if part of what here's the problem with that though, Jim, is if we're saying like, well, it's not Joker because the advanced metrics are bad. Okay. So then the thing that helps Embiid over Giannis no longer applies, right?
But I think that people aren't actually believing the advanced metrics are bad. I think that you're right. The well's been poisoned, and that those people still think in that way, and they're still going to use those metrics. They're just going to, and I don't think everyone's going to do this, which is why I don't think Jokic is entirely out of the reach either. I think this could, I think plus 160 is a decent. I see the implied odds of these being kind of how I see the potential playing out. I think you'll get some people who will just, they'll power through. They'll do Jokic. Others will sort by advanced metrics, and they'll cross out Jokic, and they'll go second down the line, and there's Embiid. And I think they have there's a fair amount of people like yourself who believe that, Jokic has been the best player this season, but that's not for them. They're going to go with Giannis.
That's the thing, though, is I actually think if I had to vote right now, I'd vote Giannis, which is why I think Giannis at plus 370, I think is incredible value. He's the best player in basketball. If we're going to remove evidence, if we're going to say that who's played in what games and what did the actual numbers say, and what's the performance when guys are on the court, if all of these like concrete things don't matter, to me, like the quickest route to, okay, if I'm not going to use those kind of things, if who played in what games and how they play doesn't really matter, what's like the most direct argument? And it's best player on the best team, and that's Giannis. And there is kind of like this consensus argument that Giannis is the best player in the NBA. And if we're again reasserting that Jokic can't win no matter what he does, then I think the most direct answer is Giannis. And I would probably vote that way anyway, just because I've seen, like, you want to talk about getting past all the metric stuff. I've just seen Giannis take over these games where he just like dominates, but he makes a huge block, takes the ball down the other end, scores, gets to the steal, goes down the other end, scores again. Like just these runs that are just absolutely destroying teams. Embiid is much more like drip, 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 drip. And then he's got the game winners on top of it. And those I think are significant. He's got wins over Giannis and Jokic in their previous matchups. He plays both of them before the end of the season. I don't know if he'll play. I don't know if Giannis will play. Like Giannis plays Jokic on the second night of a back-to-back in Denver, so I don't know if he's going to play in that game. I would imagine Jokic play or Embiid plays in Denver because again, I think he really wants to beat him again, and he really wants this award. Which is, I want to stress that's okay. Like I think it's good that Joel wants the award. Like Jokic's whole "I don't want it," blah blah blah, that's his thing. It's fine. You can want it or not want it. That shouldn't impact it. I do kind of think that Jokic has made it clear he doesn't want to win it, so he honestly shouldn't. That I think is an argument. This gets interesting from the idea of like what is and what should. I think that Embiid has a large draw right now. I'm also not sure, Jim, if this is like the problem with March is everything feels very immediate. If you're on a losing streak right now with the Nuggets, it's like, are they going to lose in the first round? If Embiid flags and then loses to Giannis or loses to Boston again or loses that second game to Jokic, how does this feel in 3 weeks from now? Is the momentum enough for Embiid to carry through, considering how much ground he had to gain back? Like that's, I think, an interesting question to ask.
Well, I think you're right that the best case for Giannis rests on that this feels semi 3-man racy, and you are getting a much, much longer number on him because the narrative moment isn't enveloping him right now. But if we, because like you said, maybe we have removed reality from this. If you fast forward to the MVP being announced, do you really see it being Giannis this year? Because I don't, and I know that's not a reasonable thing, but we're not trying to, we aren't saying who we'd vote for. We're saying how we think this plays out, right?
Yeah. See, and for me, I just have a hard time believing that, like, I guess here's part of it is Embiid's gotten a lot of things to go his way. I don't necessarily trust them to hold. Like it seems pretty likely that they split 1-1 with Jokic. Like Jokic has played terrible and the Nuggets have played terrible for weeks, but they're going to be at home. And if we look at the bigger picture, they just lost to the Bulls at home and the Nets. But if they stabilize back to where they should be, they'll beat the Sixers at home because they've beaten really good teams at home all year. Okay, so that takes away, like, that would be like a pretty bad mark. Meanwhile, you've got Giannis, who is, again, just like every single night, he's putting up like 35, 15, and 8 instead of just scoring. He does all of these things. The offensive efficiency for the Bucks has been really good since Chris Middleton got back. That's another thing that, like, I thought that the numbers were really bad, and then Bucks fans were like, hey, have you taken a look at what's been going on since Chris got back? since we actually got our number 2 option on the team, which Embiid is. There's been like this pushback of Embiid being like, for Embiid being like, well, he was without Harden and Maxey for a month in November. It's like, yeah, but he's had them the rest of the time. Literally missed like half of the year. So I think it's like interesting to look at like kind of what has gone on with that. But with Giannis, since January 23rd, I'm looking at it right now. Because this is my thing, is I was like, well, okay, if he's the driver of the offense isn't good, then that's like a real problem. The Sixers have the best offense in the league since January 23rd, but the Bucks have risen like a whole long way. Like they've actually made real strides there. And so for me, I think it'll just be interesting if the Bucks win 60 games and there's a consensus that Giannis is the best player in the league. And it's not based on stats, because if it was based on stats, it would be Jokic. What's the argument for Embiid? Like, what does a voter say to himself to say, I'm going to vote Embiid?
So you've talked me around a little bit into having this, at least in my mind, be closer. The part of the thing though is not every voter is going to sit down with you and have this impassioned speech. And again, I think, like you said, for better and worse, a lot of people are going to want to give it to Embiid. And what we're trying to figure out isn't what we think is the most deserving outcome. It's what we think is going to happen. And I really struggle to flash forward and see Giannis as MVP this year.
Interesting, because I just again,
and I think that's a ridiculous thing to say.
No, I think it's fair, because like that's what everyone's kind of feeling right now. Again, like I think the drive to, if we're in this complicated spot of, how do we usually look at the MVP? Well, we look at team performance and then the stats, and then we look at the games that they've played and how they've played, and we come to a conclusion. Well, we literally said with Joker, like we can't do that. Like there are all these reasons why we can't do that, because of his 3-time status. Like he's got to go. And then he's played like absolute garbage, and the defense has been horrible for a week and a half. And like that's enough at the right time to tank him out of it. So okay, he's out. And so then it really does become like we're back to this being a narrative award, which I thought we'd move past. Like once they kind of reshape the voter block and remove like team employees and things like that, where it's like you have these voters that really kind of dig in and notice these things. But I think this year it is a narrative award. And I think Embiid definitely has the narrative of, leading the league in scoring for the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference is really compelling.
You're going to be so angry when he gets this award.
I'm not, because I'll tell you, I've already bet it. I put it in the app. Like I did Rackham's on him to go ahead and get back within range. And like, I don't think you can really get mad at it, because it's like, if you ask me, is Joel Embiid deserving? Yeah. Oh yeah. Like Joel Embiid's amazing. He's awesome. He's a freaking monster. Like Joel Embiid is an absolutely dominant player. Oh, he's the most dominant player? No, that's Giannis. But like, he's really dominant. Like this has been my thing, is just, I don't know the singular thing that's like him. It's only if you put him in context to Giannis and Joker that you can make an argument for him. But if you're looking across the league as a whole, you wouldn't ever say like, well, he's the scoring leader. Okay, so Bradley Beal 2 years ago was the MVP. Nope, that's out. Well, then you have to start doing caveats. He's the scoring leader who's really good at defense on a really good team. The best team? No, but like a really good team. And like, that's where I think it gets interesting. This question, I do think that there's value on Giannis at plus 375 or plus 370, only because like we kind of talked about, this should probably be, I think it's priced appropriately with Embiid and Joker. I think honestly, Joker is probably a little short. I think Joker should be over 200 now, but I would have it like Embiid plus 100, Giannis plus 150, Joker plus 200. That to me is like a more appropriate spacing of it.
And you probably can get a better feel of people who may be voting. Do you think that Joker is off the top, like just a complete no vote, even if I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but this like story blows over by the time voting comes around? Have you talked to enough people? You think that's like off the top of the list for enough people?
I think that I've said this consistently, that despite the idea that the media favors Joker, I think that's categorically false. They didn't want to give it to him in 2021, and B got hurt. They had no choice. They didn't want to give him to him last year. He was just that outstanding. There really wasn't a case for anyone else. This year, there's an argument. And the argument is how they played over this last little stretch. Like that justifies it, right? It's just like
I agree.
they just needed an excuse, and the Nuggets have given them one. And I kind of wonder if Joker played a part in that, given how he responded to this entire conversation. So I think that the voters were looking for a reason not to give it to Joker, especially a third time in a row. He's provided them that. So now he was winning when it was like, man, what else are we going to do? The Nuggets are the number one team in the West. They've been a top, 5 defense for 3 months. He's got the best. He still has, they win by more when he's on, the numbers are hilarious. They win by, so when Embiid's on the court, they win by 8 points per 100 possessions. When Joker's on the court, it's 14. It's hilarious, the differential. And I need to stress this again. I would vote for Giannis right now if I had a vote. Giannis is the guy I would vote for, in part because of the stretch of how the Nuggets have played, and because the first 2 months of the season they played bad defense too. So I think it's an interesting question. The key question here though, Jim, is if you're listening to this podcast, should you vote or should you bet on Embiid right now when you can still get him at a plus number? Because if you don't think Giannis can win, and I'm telling you that I don't think Joker can win, then getting a plus number on Embiid is pretty good.
I know it is in theory. And I am truly terrified of betting this award right now. It's the only time I'm happy to be in New York and not be able to bet these awards is right now, because I feel like this is a cop out, but I just no faith betting any direction in this award right now.
I think if you're betting right now, you should bet on Embiid and Giannis, is what I would say. I think that there's value on both of those guys, and you can still drag home a profit. I think it's hard to kind of game plan out how to do that in terms of unit size, right? Do you put 1 unit on, if you want to bet a total of 5 units, do you put 3 units on Giannis and then 3 units on Embiid and 2 on Giannis? Maybe that's the way to go about it and guarantee yourself a profit, because I think it's going to be one of those two guys. It's possible I have a wrong feel on this and that there's more voters that are attached to Joker, but it does definitely feel like the tide has turned and the well has been poisoned. I think it's going to be very hard for a voter to vote for Nikola Jokic at this point. And, we'll see. I'm also very excited about the prospect of Embiid winning it over Giannis and those two facing each other in a playoff series. That would be, I
get behind that.
We could set up for some Elijah Wan, David Robinson in 1994 action. Let's move over to the Western Conference. We want to look at if there's any long shots that are live in the West. Right now, the Nuggets are plus 280. The Suns are plus 310. The Clippers are plus 460. The Warriors plus 500. The Grizzlies plus 800. The Mavericks plus 1200. The Lakers plus 1900. The Sacramento Kings at plus 2,500. The Minnesota Timberwolves 5,500. And that's where we'll stop with the serious candidates. Jim, my first takeaway from this is that we said that you should wait when the Suns were plus 200 to win the West, plus 125. You should wait. We said on this pod, take your time. There'll be a better price later. That time has come. The Suns are now plus 310 because they're having to react to this losing streak without Kevin Durant. Durant's going to be back for the playoffs, if not, late in the regular season, then probably by the end of a first round series. I can't see them being eliminated necessarily. Maybe if they got Warriors in a 4-5 or Clippers, I can see that happening, but I think KD would probably rush it to get back then. I think there's probably value right now on Phoenix at plus 310 to win the Western Conference.
Yeah, I don't hate it for sure. It's the only time it's really crossed my radar. When KD first got traded and the number got crazy, I wasn't going anywhere near it. I actually think that of the numbers that have gotten longer, I like the Nuggets number a little bit more. I think we just spent a good chunk of time talking about this kind of slip in play from the Nuggets and Jokic in particular. And I do think that, be it that he's trying to play himself out of the award, be it that it's just weighing on him a little bit, I don't foresee this sticking around. I think maybe more troubling side of things is Murray's play has slipped a little bit. But I still like the Nuggets as the favorite. Now you are betting them as the favorite, so maybe you want to wait a little longer and see if there's some KD news about him coming back and the Suns jump over and the Nuggets line gets a little bit longer. But of those two favorites right now, I actually think I would bet on Denver rather than Phoenix right now.
It's interesting, right? Is like, is this slide real, or is this just they've got the number 1 seed by being Memphis and now they're just half-assing it? I think that they're half-assing it, and that's exposes a lot of their problems. Like, if they don't go full tilt, then you can beat them. Like, they're bad. They can lose to the Spurs when they play as lazy as they have. Their bench is bad. They're vulnerable. I think the Suns are vulnerable. I think we've kind of seen that their inability to win without Durant exposes some of the weak points in the roster, even if Durant covers up for most of them. I don't necessarily know that you're getting a great price on Denver, though. That's the thing, is like, I think you can probably wait and then wait until like a game 3 of the first round, right? See if they can win 2 at home and then or lose 1 at home going into a game 3 in the first round, or if they lose game 3 in the first round, or if it's 2-2, wait, I think, and you can get a better price on Denver rather than buying them right now as the favorite here at plus 280.
Well, and to your point, I don't hate the idea of waiting to see how the bracket plays out, because I actually will like them over someone like a Warriors. If the Warriors slip to like the 8 to play in, and they land at the 8, and it's Warriors Nuggets in the first round, I'm going to be betting the Nuggets. But I bet that will kind of shift these numbers if the Nuggets draw a big name team in that first round, and that's maybe a better time to play them. I also don't just hate betting a little bit on the Nuggets and the Suns. I've kind of come around and looking at this as a 2-team race in the West. You have a note here on the Clippers. I'm not seeing this Clippers team come out of the West. They have to really, their whole mode is wait and flip it on. I don't know if they can flip it on.
They're playing better now. But that's the thing, is they hit that nadir after the All-Star break, and everybody was like, they're winless without Russ, and look at Russ, and all these things, when it was like the actual numbers were like, oh yeah, they've won their minutes with Russ on the floor. And now they've routed off some really good wins. And the bigger thing I think with the Clippers is they're better built for playoff play. That's a large part of this, is that I think one of the things that I missed in my analysis of the Clippers going into the year, on top of overrating their depth, was the Clippers are really well built, I think, for playoff basketball, possession by possession, like Kawhi Leonard, isolation, pull-ups, 3-point volume, switchability, all these types of things. They match up well with Phoenix. They match up well with Golden State. They have these matchups that they can really kind of disturb. Now, if they wind up in the 4-5, they'll have to face Denver, and I actually think that's a bad matchup for them. They've had trouble with Denver since the 3-1 collapse. But as far as making a run and getting into a conference finals appearance, I think that there's probably some value on the Clippers right now at plus 450. I have taken a Clippers Bucks position this week on one of my many season long building finals matchups. Is I like Clippers Bucks right now as a pretty solid matchup. I think a lot of it is the Clippers have told us all year that we can't trust them. That's absolutely true. But we may have hit absolute rock bottom. There's always a price with a team this talented where it's you kind of need to buy them. I think that's probably there. You mentioned the 7-8s. The Warriors were man, it's really crazy. The Warriors could finish 5 or 8 or be out of the playoffs entirely. The defending champs could be out of the playoffs entirely. That's crazy, but that's how tight it is in the Western Conference, and that's how bad it is on the road. They have a number of road games coming up, by the way. Is there a 7-8 team, Los Angeles Lakers being an obvious one? Is there a Lakers team that you can look at, or a 7-8 team, any of them, even if it's an OKC or a Dallas? Are there any of those teams that you can see making a run here when you're getting into the double digits?
Well, it's funny that you said you had the Freudian, you called them a Lakers team instead of a play-in team. I think it's front of mind for everyone. I think, the way that the West has just refused to bury them, because no team can really secure those play-in spots. They at plus 1900, it is, I think it's probably the best number of those long shots you're going to get. Now, do I have any faith in AD, who can't even play in a back-to-back when LeBron is out, and old LeBron staying healthy for a full run? I don't have a whole lot, but plus 1900 implies you don't need to have a whole lot of faith that's going to come through to have some sort of an edge there. The Kings bet I still don't really hate, but only as we've talked about in the past as like a future hedge. I don't see the Kings coming out of the West, but the bracket keeps breaking really nice for them. And they have a really long number. And even if you're going to have to pay a heavy juice, when you're betting the Nuggets or Suns in the series price in the Western Conference Finals against the Kings, I think that there can be a play there that gives you a little bit of advantage because this Kings team is really solid. And I think especially if they're at home for this stretch, I think that finding them in the Western Conference Finals is not really a stretch of the imagination at all.
You got a play on the East here. I think is really interesting. By the way, if you want to hear more about the Kings, I have an article up in the Action Network app. You should download that right now and check it out. It makes the case that Jim's just made like a lot about the brackets shaping up really well for the Kings. I do think there's value on the Kings here at a pretty insulting number for how they've played. You got to play on the East, though. I'm very excited to hear you give this take. I almost wish I could pull Brandon Anderson on to have him hear this take because he hates this team so much. Who is your kind of dark horse long shot in the Eastern Conference?
Well, full transparency, you set this up and you said, take a look at the West. And I looked at the West and I was like, there's a couple things there. Let me just glance at the East. And one jumped out to me as an insulting number, to be honest. The Heat are at plus 4,000 to get out of the East right now. That is a crazy number. I know this Heat team is not that good right now. They're also a Heat team that has more playoff experience than almost anybody, arguably the best coach in the league. And speaking of how brackets line up, I think the bracket looks kind of interesting for them. So right now, the Heat are basically locked into the 7 seed. With, of course, you have to prove it to be the 7 seed with the play-in, but they're in that 7 spot right now with the Celtics pretty much. Not pretty much. I mean, Philly could, if Philly gets really hot, but Philly has a tough schedule down the stretch here. So I think Boston will probably hold on to that too. So we've already heard Boston people be scared of this exact matchup. They barely got past the Heat last year. This is a different team under the Celtics. I think kind of the consensus now is that Udoka was a better coach than Joe. And if it comes to a playoff series in that first round, I think the Celtics are getting really nervous to have the Heat there. So, again, there's a reason it's plus 4,000. The Heat have a negative net rating on the season. They have not looked great, but Jimmy has looked pretty good. He himself has been carrying the team to, some of these tighter wins, which is why with the Heat, a team like that, I do tend to give net rating a little bit of leeway because I do think an experienced team like the Heat can, let the rope go on some of the blowout losses and then really tighten it down in those wins. And then it skews the net rating a little bit. And then if they get past Boston, do we really trust Philadelphia? I mean, I know you don't trust Embiid to get past anybody and put Bam on him. And then, then you're in the conference finals and it's the argument for the Kings. You have a great hedge spot. And before Giannis broke through, I mean, this is a couple Giannis iterations ago, the Heat were a team that gave him a lot of trouble. They're a defense that can do decently against him. And, the Bucks themselves haven't been the epitome of health in the postseason of late. So one or two things breaks their way. At plus 4,000, this was one that, you log it for cheap. You throw, a small amount on it and you kind of forget about it. And then if somehow it pays off or it's you're able to hedge out of it down the road, you're a happy man.
It's interesting because we mentioned this the other night on Buckets that they have now 50. Yeah, they have 50 clutch games this season, which is absurd. Right. And they have a really good record in those games, 28 and 22, I believe. And I will say that I was talking to Seth Partnow from The Athletic, and he was telling me that clutch performance doesn't have a strong playoff correlation. Like good clutch teams don't do better in the playoffs, which I think is like an interesting thing to consider with them. Last year I love them versus the Sixers. My biggest bet of the playoffs in any single game was the game 5 in Miami versus the Sixers. Love that matchup for them. They may wind up in a 3-6 if the Nets kind of surged ahead and then like caught a little bit. If the Heat can catch the Nets, they can flip that into a 3-6, and then they could face the Sixers or the Celtics. And both of those matchups are pretty good. Like they're going to face one of Boston and Philly, it looks like. Like even if it's 6 or 7, they're going to face because I have no faith in Atlanta beating them in a play-in tournament game. It's the play-in tournament. Like, one hot shooting night can definitely swing it. But boy, do I want to trust Jimmy Butler to get the win in that game. Like if they make that a narrow spread so we can just bet the money line, that's what I'm hoping for a 7-8 play-in tournament game of Heat Hawks. The offense is so bad. It's been a little better as of late. Like somebody was sharing, a Heat fan I follow was saying that they've averaged like 119 per game the last like 5 games or so. It's so bad. And this is what killed them versus Boston is they have these stretches where they just can't score. And so I just have a hard time seeing them being able to keep up. And like I don't think that they're as equipped to handle Embiid as they were last year because they lost some of the center depth. So if Bam gets in foul trouble, they don't have any backup centers to really roll out there. That's a problem. I think it's tough, but like here's the other thing that was like, despite all these tactical stuff and the stats, I just feel like you're right that the Heat are just going to be there at the end of the game and it's going to be Jimmy Butler and 1, and then all of a sudden they're down 1. But I think for me, I think I would still rather bet them game by game. Like, let's wait and see them get there. Let's see them face the opponent, wait for them to go down in a series and then maybe start betting them, especially betting them big. Because we did that last year where we weren't just betting teams to win a series when they went down. We would go bigger than that and be like, okay, Boston's down 3-2. Let's bet them to win the East and go that route. And that was pretty successful.
Yeah, I think that this line's not going to go anywhere too fast. I don't think you have to be rushing to this.
All right, that's going to do it for Futures Friday. I appreciate Jim coming on and taking my angst about the MVP. Make sure to follow Jim on Twitter at TurvyBets. There's a Best Bets episode waiting for you in this feed, so make sure to check that out. Our thanks to David Payne, our producer. Make sure to download the Action Network app. It's got all the stuff you need for the second round of the NCAA tournament, as well as throughout the NCAA tournament and getting you set for the NBA playoffs. We'll talk to you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.